So a lot of people are going to be listening to this and say, but you're not offering any any social safety net for the people that need it the most. And at the same time, if you're saying that the minimum wage doesn't work, even for all the philosophical reasons that you laid out, they're going to say, but no matter what, there's a certain amount of people that need help. I basically believe that, which is why I haven't fully gone libertarian. So what's the response?
So I agree. There's a certain number of people, I think it's very small, by the way, who need help, because I think capitalism, in all of history, anywhere it's tried, creates more jobs than there are people. So anybody who is able can work, and work at a decent living where they can live their life without a lot of help. But look, emergencies happen. Bad stuff happens to people. And some people truly cannot survive, right? They've got problems, whether their brain is not developed enough or their body's not developed enough, something they need to be taken care of.
Right.
So I believe in a safety net. I just don't believe the government should provide it. I don't believe I should be coerced to help them.
Right.
You want to help them? I want to help them. We can get together, start a foundation. So charity is the safety net. Charity was the safety net in the 19th century, but not only charity. You know that in the 19th century they sold insurance against poverty? They were mutual aid societies where we would all get together and buy insurance, in a sense, insuring all of us. You know, a mutual type of insurance deal in order to for poverty, or for if your house burned down, or kind of just generally bad stuff happening in life. You could, in a true free market in healthcare, for example, you could buy an insurance policy, maybe even for life, on a baby that hasn't been born yet. I mean, the possibilities once you free up the economy from regulations and controls, if you actually let people make decisions based on their own interests, are unbelievable. So I don't believe anybody's going to be dying in the streets. I don't believe anybody, I believe the opposite. I think fewer people will die from poverty, fewer people will be hurt from poverty. I think people will be much richer, much better off, and that the safety net that exists will be much more effective and driven primarily towards those people who, for no fault of their own, are in the situation. Some people deserve the fate that they get. If you're a wife-beating drunk, capitalism's not good for you.
Yeah.
But I'm all for that. I believe in justice. I believe in fairness. Fairness is not equality. Fairness means getting what you deserve. And wife-beating drunks deserve bad stuff happening to them.
So it's so interesting to me how it really sounds like a branding issue, because people think of capital. There's this idea now, and I think it has a lot to do with crony capitalism and the way our politicians have allowed, corporations to basically steal from America and, hide money elsewhere and hide taxes.
But we, of course, object to cronyism.
Right.
And the only solution to cronyism is to shrink government power so that government doesn't get involved in business, or business doesn't have any incentive to lobby it. So
that's basically Atlas Shrugged right there. That was you just gave me the one sentence.
The smaller the government, the less cronyism there is. I mean, there's a famous story about Microsoft. In 1994, they were brought in front of Congress, and Orrin Hatch, who was then a young senator from Utah, lambasted them for not lobbying, for not having a presence in Washington, D.C., for not doing all the things that corporate America was expected to do. And Microsoft walked away and said, look, you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. We're not interested.
Yeah.
Right? And, of course, 6 months later, the Justice Department comes knocking, goes after Microsoft for giving a product away for free, Internet Explorer, destroys the company from my perspective, right? Today, Microsoft spends tens of millions of dollars a year. They have a beautiful building in Washington, D.C., about equal distance from the Capitol and the White House. This is how it happens. The politicians come and they say, give us a handout, or when we write the regulations, we're going to screw you.
Wow, I really want to get into that for a sec, because I remember that happening, 1994. I was, I think, a senior in high school. I remember that. So Internet Explorer was just it was the internet browser that was built into Windows.
Yes.
And basically the government said, you have a monopoly on this, right?
Yeah,
so
but of course Netscape invented web browsing.
Right.
They were charging, I think it was 50 or 70 bucks a pop, and here was being bundled with the operating system, and Netscape was saying, wait a minute, we can't compete against a free product. You're dumping, in a sense. And this is antitrust laws. And, just quickly, antitrust laws, and this is absurdity of antitrust laws. If you sell a product really, really cheap, then you're violating antitrust laws because you're dumping. If you sell a product much more expensive than your competitors, you must have a monopoly, so you're in violation of antitrust laws. And if you sell your product at the same price as your competitors, you're colluding. Yeah. It must be collusion, because how would you sell it all at the same price?
So that's like the cell phone companies, because everybody's within $5. So.
Antitrust is a law that is meaningless. It is completely at the discretion of the regulator when to apply it and when not. And that's what authoritarians always love. They love laws that are not clear, that are not objective, so they can choose. You didn't pay me this month, so I'm going to go after you, right? You're not lobbying, so I'm going to go after you. Google has learned this, right? Google and Netflix and these guys, they spend huge amounts of lobbying. Democrats, Republicans, they spread it all around. It's interesting that Google has no antitrust problems. Apple does, because Apple has lobbied very little, right? Microsoft did, because it lobbied zero. So this is the game that's being played, and it's a game that is determined by the politicians. They're the ones with the guns. They're the ones forcing this upon businessmen.
Right. So is there a risk there, though, that if you remove all of that stuff, that the companies eventually will become more powerful than the government? Now, I suppose you wouldn't view that as a risk per se, but that Apple, at this point, Apple has more money than the government, right? Apple's in the black, you know?
Look, this is the difference.
Yeah.
And this is a fundamental confusion. This is what you said. A lot of this is about words. It's about words, yes, but the deeper philosophical meaning of words. There's such a thing as economic power, and there's such a thing as political power. Political power is about coercion. It's about guns. It's about force. Economic power is about voluntary transactions. I have no problem companies gaining more and more and more economic power. They can only have that power as long as I voluntarily choose to trade with them.
Right.
I can choose to buy a Samsung tomorrow. I can choose to boycott Apple for a variety of reasons if I want to tomorrow. There are other choices.
Right.
There always are choices.
But there is the risk that they could just buy every other company and eventually...
Never happened. Never happened. So
because a better mousetrap will always come along, right?
Better mousetrap. The classical example of this is Rockefeller, right? He had 90+% of all oil refining in the 1870s, right? So monopoly. So what were we taught in Econ 101? Prices go up, quality goes down. Never happened. Prices went down every single year. I challenge anybody to look at the data. Go down every year. Quality goes down every year. Because Rockefeller understood that if he raised prices, competition would come about. And competition will often come about from products you would never expect. So, for example, in the 1870s, Rockefeller's oil was being used for kerosene to light us. Who competed him out of that business?
I guess the...
Thomas Edison. Yeah. What bureaucrat, what central planner would have sat back in 1870 and says, yeah, this guy in that lab, he's going to compete. Nobody would have imagined that. That's the beauty of real freedom, of real capitalism. Today, of course, Edison would have never been allowed to have the lab because he violated every code in the book. I'm sure he didn't wear goggles when he did his experiment. There's no way the regulators would allow that.
Probably,
absolutely. So in 19th century, we had relative freedom, and the consequence was the greatest pace of innovation in human history, the biggest innovative leaps in human history. I mean, really, today we get another app and we get all excited. Electricity was invented, right?
Right.
Lighting. Think of all the stuff that comes from electricity, and then think of the trains, automobiles, airplanes. I mean, the innovation in the 19th century, early part of the 20th century, are massive. Today, they're little incremental.
So is that possible that just sort of the arc of humanity has changed, where those things? No. So you think it's boundless? It really is.
I think it's boundless, and I think what's constraining today is our educational system, which is pathetic, particularly in science and math and the things where we teach kids to think. And I think it's political. I think when you regulate people, when everything you do is by permission, people don't take risks, people don't challenge themselves. And this is what I meant by the enemy of the mind is the gun. If I put a gun to your back of your neck and say, these things you cannot do, it shuts down whole parts of the mind. And this is exactly what the Enlightenment was fighting against. This is the whole idea of free speech. And free inquiry was the idea is you can't shut down the human mind. You can't shut it down in science. You can't shut it down in philosophy or / religion. You can't shut it down when it comes to business, because what you do when you do that is you destroy whole areas of inquiry. And some of those inquiries will be wrong. I mean, some experiments, blow up in your face, right? But you gotta fail in order to be successful. When we bail people out, when we don't allow restructurings, when we don't allow the dynamism that exists, we suffer. The reason we have so much innovation in Silicon Valley is because that is the least regulated industry in our economy. The reason Wall Street keeps collapsing is because it is the most regulated industry in our economy.
So, okay, so Wall Street is regulated and we bail them out, and when they're too big to fail, we make them bigger.
Sure.
So I get all that. So what would the alternative been if we had just actually let them all fail? I mean, people basically say Obama saved...
That's a false alternative, right? The alternative is 80% regulation or 90% regulation. No, the alternative is zero, right? The alternative is to unwind the system. The alternative is to get rid of the pages and pages and bookloads of regulations over the financial industry, free them up completely. That will probably lead to a completely different looking banking system than what we have today. But also make it clear, we're not going to bail you out when you deposit money in the bank because there's no deposit insurance.
Right.
But we're also not going to bail any banks out when they get in trouble. We're just stepping back and letting the market be free. And look, before 1913, the United States had no Federal Reserve. It had no bank bailouts. It had bank regulations, particularly in the state level, which were disastrous. And generally, the economy grew the fastest in human history. From the Civil War until World War I, it was an amazing period of economic growth and economic success without a Fed, without central planners. That's what I'd like to see. The lesson of 2008 is get rid of the Federal Reserve. The lesson of 2008 is stop regulating the banks and the credit agencies and the rating agencies and all these things that distort markets.
So my Bernie people are not going to be happy with you because you're both saying there's a problem here. Yeah. You're saying the problem is the government has artificially controlled what Wall Street can do. He would say we have to control them even more.
Yeah, and I'm saying we've tried Bernie's solution since the Great Depression. Right, during the Great Depression, the first thing FDR did when he came into office in 33 and 34 is pass massive bodies of financial regulations. Since then, we've had inflation, we've had the S&L crisis, we've had 2008. Those regulations that were passed in 33 and 34 don't work. They never worked. They were disastrous from the beginning. It just takes decades to see their full manifestation. The solution is not to load up on them a whole new set of the same bad thing. You don't, if you run an experiment and it doesn't work, you don't double up on the experiment, right? What you do is you rethink your fundamental ideas about it, and we need to rethink finance from the beginning.
Yeah, so I love that this really all comes down to human nature, right? Because if you were, let's say you were of the Bernie mindset, and you'd say we have to regulate them more, I guess what he would say is, or what you would say is, well, someone, even if with all the regulations on earth, someone, because of human nature, is going to come in and figure out a way to still screw it up.
No, it's the regulations that are screwing the system up, right? The regulations cause the crisis. The regulations provide the incentives for people to behave in particular ways that are screwy. I'm saying is the reason we trust regulation and we don't trust markets, and this is the key, right?
Yeah.
Because in every field this is true. A crisis happens, we regulate it, which causes another crisis to happen. We regulate even more, which causes a bigger crisis. And this was observed by Ayn Rand in the 50s and 40s. This isn't a new phenomenon. This is the way government functions. This is the way human beings function. Is the fundamental we don't trust is self-interest. We think that self-interest leads to lying, stealing, cheating, all this bad behavior. So we regulate it.
Right.
So all that happens is the regulations caused incentives to be misaligned and bad things to happen. So oh no, it's greed, it's self-interest again. So we regulate even more. I'm saying that if we trusted self-interest, if we got it, and why do we trust the regulators? Why do you walk into an elevator anywhere in the United States, and there's a little diploma on the elevator thing. It says a government regulator inspected this elevator, it won't kill you.
Yeah.
And why do we go, oh, okay, now it's safe? Because the elevator inspector, we believe, is for the public interest. He's on the common good. He's not self-interested. God forbid, be self-interested. Right. He's just doing it for all of us. And I'm saying that's a bogus, immoral standard. I don't want people to be in the public interest. The public interest means nothing.
So you think these elevator guys are just walking in there and signing that sheet?
I'm saying that the guy who inspects the elevator as a government employee is probably much more open to bribes than if the inspection of the elevators was done by the insurance company, that if something bad happened to the elevator, they would suffer financial cost and that guy would be fired. The elevator inspector hired by the government will never be fired. He's got tenure. Take food inspectors in California. California farmers are much more worried about the grocery store inspectors than they are about the government inspectors, because the grocery store has something to lose if they poison us.
Right.
The inspector from the government has nothing to lose. This is why when Ben Bernanke, in my view, is one of the most awful Federal Reserve chairmen ever. He screwed up 08. He completely messed up 07. The recovery's been the slowest in history. Everything the Fed did Everything he said in 07, 08 turned out to be wrong. He was wrong about everything. He said the housing crisis wouldn't happen. It wouldn't cause a recession. Freddie and Fannie were fine. Lehman Brothers wasn't going to go bankrupt. I've got a list of all his statements. They're all wrong. What happened to him? He got rehired,
right.
and today he gets $250,000 to give a speech, right? Yeah. He's become a hero. What happened to the private bankers who actually drove their businesses, who did what the Fed did to their own businesses? They're out of jobs. Yeah, they're not behind jails. I know Bernie would like them all in jail. But they've suffered the consequences. They've lost their jobs. Nobody wants to talk to them. Nobody will hire them again. That's what happens in business. In business, if you fail, you're out. Government, when you fail, we reward you, particularly if you're in the bureaucracy, right? So I'm saying let's shift the model to where we trust individuals, we trust their self-interest, we leave companies alone. And if the companies do bad things, let them fail. We can boycott them if we don't like the way they behave towards, I don't know, gays or whatever. If we don't like their behavior, don't go to Chick-fil-A. Just don't buy Chick-fil-A. Boycott them. That's
right. So this is where you would say if the Christian pizza maker doesn't want to make pizza for gays, you wouldn't say let the government stop them from doing that. You would say, well, boycott them and don't give them business. And
yes, but I want to be a little bit more radical than that. Because this is a problem. We have Ted Cruz and people like that talking about religious freedoms. What religious freedom? I just believe in freedom. And the fact is that people have a right to discriminate. So I would expand it if the
But don't give them your business.
Yeah, don't give. So my point is this: if the baker doesn't want to bake a cake for a Jewish wedding, he has just as much right to do that as he has to discriminate. But I would never go near the plate. I would stand outside with a placard. I'd be on the barricades to drive that immoral bastard out of business, right?
Yeah.
But he has a right to be a bigot. People have a right to be racist.
Yeah,
they just
I'm with
don't
you.
have a right to force it on you.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Some of my friends on the left that will say, well, but they're using, the public street that they're on, so then we wouldn't want them to discriminate against black people. And I get the idea behind that.
But once they walk off the public street into your store, it's yours. I am very discriminating in who I invite to my home. It's not discrimination based on race or any of these other factors, but people who I think are nice are invited. People who I don't like are not invited. We all discriminate. Discrimination is a good thing. What we need to teach people is not to discriminate based on stupid things or non-essential things. You discriminate based on a person's character. That's the appropriate discrimination. But are they always going to be irrational people? Are they always going to be stupid people? Are they always going to be bad people? Yes. But the job of the government is not to legislate them out of their stupidity. The job of the government is to let them suffer the consequences of their stupidity, which means back off.
Yeah, we barely got into this here, so I know. I certainly hope you'll come back so we can unpack more.
Absolutely, would be happy to.
Yeah, this was a pleasure, and I think I'm looking forward to the comment section because it's going to be wild. All right, I want to thank Yaron Brook for joining me today. You guys can follow him on Twitter. It's @Yaron Brook, and he does respond, and he'll fight with you and send you links, and maybe he'll send you some of these pamphlets. And you can check out his book, Equal is Unfair, in the description right down below. Thanks.